when it comes to giving feedback at any point, you have to have it backed up with facts.
With
Otherwise,
data.
it's with data and facts. Otherwise, it's just emotion. And another thing that you brought up there, which I think is so important, and I want to get into your endurance in a second, but a lot of times, which is very tough, and I've seen this even with my family's business as they grew from a $50 million real estate company to a $1 billion real estate company, is Stephen, the people who got you from 5 million to 10 million and then 10 million to 50 million, they may not be the right people for the team because they lack that experience. So, what advice do you have for our listeners? Because we have a lot of entrepreneurs there that it's tough because you want to be loyal to these people because they've helped you get there, but you're doing yourself a disservice by being overly loyal in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're doing them a disservice as well because they're probably in a very uncomfortable place. And now that I've been advising, other entrepreneurs after my own exit, I'm advising other entrepreneurs on getting them to an exit. And I've seen this happen, several times, which was almost mirroring what happened in my own company. Loyalty is always there. That's an entrepreneurial and a founder's trait. You're loyal to your staff that got you there. But you're doing your company a disservice if they don't have the necessary experience to bring it to the very next level. And the example I like to use is sales, right? If you have a sales leader that's been with you from day one and has helped you get your company from 0 to $10 million in sales and is struggling to get past that $10 million threshold, that's because they've never run a company at above $10 million. You'd be amazed at how a person that has experience, let's say running a $30 million company, can come into yours and bring it up relatively quickly just because of the playbooks that they have executing at that level. And I hate to pick on sales because I've had some great hiring decisions on the sales leadership front. I've had some bad ones, but that's a easy numbers analogy. And the same applies for CFOs, for head of product. It's all, have they managed a company or a group at that scale? And if the answer is no, you're doing yourself and them a disservice.
100%. I'm fortunate right now. I'm experiencing that at Learn It, my company, where we brought in a fractional CRO who used to run Gong's enterprise team, and just the experience and the playbooks that they have. I mean, I just think it's important for the entrepreneurs and the founders out there. You gotta be open minded to be able to accept that and to be able to continue to want to grow. And it's uncomfortable to change, but you got to shift and make change. You mentioned a little bit because I think this is incredible. Your journey with the endurance sports. What triggered that for you?
Yeah, I call it my midlife crisis. I was turning 40 and I realized that I had some really bad genes in me. Between my parents and my grandparents, God bless them. I overuse this line all the time. They had it all: high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, strokes, you name it, they had it, which meant that those genes were in here somewhere. Not that I was unhealthy per se, and my wife hates it when I call myself a couch potato, but I was a couch potato. I really didn't do anything athletically other than ski in the winter occasionally. And totally by coincidence, while I was having all these thoughts about my longevity, somebody at work had completed a triathlon. And I always thought a triathlon was this el- elite Olympic event for, like, how does a mere mortal compete a triathlon? And I learned that you just go to this website called active.com and you find a race, you swipe your credit card, you sign up, and voila, you can get into a triathlon. And another switch went off in my head saying, I love this activity. It's going to keep me super, super healthy. And I'm going to pursue this for a long time.
What did you love about it?
I love the challenge. First of all, I mean, I love competing, right? So I'm a relatively competitive person, but I never competed in sports. And what I loved about this is really competition against yourself. I never got to the professional level. I never got to the point where I was near the podium or where there was any prize money involved. But I was competing against myself, right? Competing against my ability to complete a specific distance. It started off with relatively short distances, and then it got to the Ironman distance and actually beyond. So I just love the challenge of, can I get to that finish line before the cutoff time? And it became so, and still is, incredibly addictive.
For somebody who might be interested in it, what was the hardest part about getting started for you with endurance sports?
With triathlons specifically, it was the swimming. I wasn't uncomfortable nor scared of the water, but I just didn't have any form nor style nor rhythm in the water. So getting comfortable with first swimming and then swimming the necessary distances, right? So a sprint triathlon is an 800-meter swim, which is the equivalent of about 32 laps in a 25-yard pool. An Ironman distance triathlon starts with a 2.4-mile swim, so
Oh,
which is significant.
yeah. That
So for me that was tough, but I overcame that quickly, and now I can swim for miles without a problem. I just did a race earlier this year where it started with a 10K swim, so a 6.2-mile swim.
how much of it do you think is physical versus mental?
Oh, it's everybody says it's as much as mental as it is physical. So if I had to throw a number at it, I'd say 50-50. Um, the physical part is table stakes. You should not attempt this or try it if you don't have the physical ability to endure. But the physical ability alone is not going to get you to the finish line. I mean, it becomes a mental, and every single event that I participated in, probably approaching 100 over 100 at this point, has been a mental game at some point in the race where you have to go like into a really, really deep, dark place and get your head straight.
Whether it's Instagram or on social media, you share a lot of this, right? So our listeners, they should be they could be following you to see what your journey is like on some of these events that you have coming up and everything.
I love to share my lessons learned, and I call it the play by play. So I blog about the majority of these crazy races and mountaineering trips that I do. So I've got a blog on my website, stevenpivnik.com, which shares a lot of these stories. And I do share some of my training. Like my big goal right now is to climb Everest in May. So I have a countdown going on Instagram at Steven Pivnik, where I share the daily training routine, which is increasing in intensity. I get tired just talking about the training that I do.
I get tired of just even thinking about it. I mean, it's overwhelming, but it's amazing. Now, before we move on a little bit, you have a great story about your first ultra marathon, which, by the way, is a 50K race. Um, and I think you described it as pure hell. Can you please share with us that story?
Oh, so one of my favorite sayings, thank you for teeing that up because I love that story. And you know what? I went through my blog and I remembered it was a 50-mile race, not 50K. So it was actually
Okay,
worse. It
okay.
was 50 miles, not 50K is 32 miles. This was 50
Hey,
miles.
let's just stop
And
for a second. 50 miles?
50 miles, so like a double marathon.
Oh,
So my favorite saying, one of them, I'm full of them, is anytime you do something for the first time without expert guidance, your results are going to be suboptimal at best or a failure at worst. I'd never ran an ultra marathon before, and I didn't seek out advice from people that did. I just decided to wing it.
you just did it.
I'm like, hey, I've done a marathon before. I've done many marathons. I've done a couple of Ironman. I can go do an ultra. How hard can it be? I signed up for the Monument Valley 50K, I'm sorry, 50 miler in Arizona. And at Monument Valley, yeah, Arizona, beautiful, beautiful national park. Forget about running it. If you just want to go visit, I highly, highly recommend visiting Monument Valley. It is gorgeous. Um, so start running. First, right out of the gate, after running, I realized I'm having a really hard time breathing. I'm like, what's going on? Why can't I breathe? It's only been literally a quarter of a mile. I look at my Garmin, my sports watch, and it says that I'm 1 mile above sea level. If you know anything about doing things at altitude, it takes multiple days for your body to acclimatize. So when a sports team plays Denver or in Denver, they arrive 3 to 5 days before the game so that their bodies can acclimatize to the reduced amount of oxygen in the air. I literally just arrived the day before, no acclimatization. So I had to get used to the breathing, which was hard. Then, like a few miles in, all of a sudden the dirt trail ends and I'm in deep, deep sand, like super deep sand. So I turn to the guy next to me and I go, dude, what's up with the sand on this course? And he goes, hey, buddy, you didn't read the race guide? 50% of this course is going to be deep sand. I'm like, great. Now, I mean, as if running 50 miles at higher altitude without
Isn't hard
acclimatization
enough.
enough, I got to run in sand. So now I'm running in sand, which obviously is taking longer than running on dirt. Then eventually, like the sun goes down, it gets really cold in the desert at night. I didn't bring any cold weather gear. I thought I'd be done with this thing. I knew it was going to take me about at least 10 hours or so. So And I'm like, I don't need any cold weather gear. I'm not going to be running at night. I'm freezing. I'm running. My feet are bleeding. I'm cramping up. Now all of a sudden, I'm like, what else can possibly go wrong? It starts hailing. So now it's
Come
pitch
on.
black. I've got this dinky little headlamp on that's trying to put light on the course so I can, stay on course and not get lost. And I'm dodging a baseball size hail that's coming down. And th- fortunately, that was the end of it. At that point, I was only about 3 miles away from the finish line. But you know what? I was determined to finish that race before the cutoff time. And as hard as it was, as much as I was in pain and bleeding and cramping and freezing, I finished that race before the cutoff time.
Hey, and how did you feel when you finally got to your car and just sat there for a sec?
Oh, it was an incredible feeling of accomplishment. I'm like, you know what? I was proud of myself. I'm like, A, you're a fool for not learning more about the race. And because this day could have gone a lot easier on you if you just did a little bit of homework. So shame on you, but congratulations for, sticking it out and not throwing in the flag, because that's an option in many, many races. You can throw in the flag, right? Actually, in this one, you would have to pay the Indian tribe there to find you in the middle of the night. So there's aid stations every 10 miles or so, but if you just decide to call it,
You gotta
good
find a
luck getting
station
found.
first.
You got to
Yeah,
find this.
right?
Yeah, you got to find the station first. So there's plenty of emergency equipment that one can carry, which I did not have at the time because I was silly. Um, in case of these types of events.
And like you said, you can give up in that, just like you can give up in your as a parent, as an entrepreneur, or anything, or you could figure out how to fricking, make it happen. What, what other I know we talked about measuring, but what other parallels between endurance sports and entrepreneurship do you see?
Oh, there's so many. The list goes on and on. So planning, preparation, execution, pivots, setbacks, stamina, endurance. Those 7 things that I just rattled off, and there's probably 7 more, are applicable in both. And I use the deep experience I've established over the years. If I'm struggling during a race, I start reminiscing about the times I struggled to make payroll, right? When I was struggling to get a product to market, I would reminisce about, struggle to finish a race. And I say, hey, you know what? I had all these obstacles going against me in that example. I can deal with the obstacles that I'm being faced with here. So the two are super, super similar. And I love to say that entrepreneurship is an endurance sport because of all the similarities.
Reflect back, right, Stephen? Reflect back on some of the successes that you made, and sometimes when things are really, really tough, it's important to be able to look back and say, "Hey, I've done this before." Maybe not that specific thing, but you've overcome great challenges, and it's really not a failure unless you throw in the towel.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Ironman has this great video on their website. They have dozens of inspirational videos, but something like, "Quit now, and nobody will ever know, but it will haunt you for the rest of your life." Something. Don't quote me on that. It's not verbatim how their video goes. That's much more
Sounds
eloquent
good.
than that.
Yeah.
But you get the point. Nobody will know if you throw in the towel, but you'll know, and it's going to bother you. And the few races where I have thrown in the towel, I'm not gonna lie, it's bothered me significantly, and I can't help but think back and kick myself, saying, Why? I know it was tough, but you could have maybe held on a little bit longer."
Well, you probably reflected back on what you could have done differently and learn from it, because we all, and go from there. One other thing that I hear you talk a lot about, which I agree, I grew up being a, baseball player in college, and one thing that they really, and I've used this in my business career now too, is visualization, visualizing success. Can you share with us, your thoughts around that?
I'm a huge fan of visualization, and I've been doing it from the early days of my company. When I would walk into a sales meeting, I would stop at the front of the building, and my company was started in Manhattan, so these were like in front of Manhattan skyscrapers. I'd stop in the front, close my eyes, and I would envision myself coming back into the same building, this time with this company as my customer. So I just envisioned and manifested success for that sales meeting. And I've been using that same tool for so many different things. My two biggest examples is about 5 or 6 years ago, when I set my sights on selling my company and also qualifying for and competing in the Ironman World Championship, I printed out a check for a specific amount of money and I hung it next to my computer. Printed out a check made out to me. And I also printed out a poster of Kona, the Ironman World Championship, and I hung it right next to that check. And I saw that in my peripheral vision. And what I love to share is, and this is scientifically proven, the human mind cannot differentiate between an event that actually occurred or one that was properly envisioned. This isn't woo. I mean, this is like a tool that actually works. As long as you do it repeatedly and properly, and you don't need to be an expert. There's a million YouTube videos on how to go through a 5-minute envisioning exercise. When you do it, you're subconsciously programming yourself to make better decisions and to take better actions. So in the case of that selling the company and the world championship, I was actively pursuing those goals, but also subconsciously making all the necessary decisions to make both of those come true.
On the flip side of that is if you have limiting beliefs and self-doubt and visualize yourself failing, I can promise you that's gonna happen, right? If
Oh,
you go in that
100%.
direction.
Henry Ford that said it. If you think you can, or if you think you can't, you're right.
And so you had that check up there, and then you worked for it, and you ended up selling, exiting binary tree. And one of the things that inspired me that what you said is that you talked about how, you only see the 1% out there, the Googles, the Facebooks, of these companies who are like super successful. But the 99% out there, like yourself, it took 27 years for your exit. I've been at Learn It for 30 years and grinding it out, right? Grinding it out, but I still love what I do. And whatever happens in the future happens. But so I really appreciate when you say that, right? Because that's if you go in as an entrepreneur and you think that everything is like that 1% that you see on CNBC or Instagram, that's not how it is. I mean, you got to go in understanding that there's the 99% of people like you do that. So share with us when you decided it was time to sell and how you planned to beforehand to make that exit.
Sure. So in my specific case, and this is different for many entrepreneurs, I was at it for so long that I didn't want to be part of the sale. So I want, and most acquirers insist that the founder or the CEO, stay on because he or she is integral to the operations of the company and part of this big asset. So 3 years prior to the exit, I brought in a CEO to replace. So I basically fired myself, or put it this way, I promoted myself to executive chairman and brought in a CEO to run the day-to-day operations so that when it came time for the sale to occur, the acquirer would see that I was no longer an integral part to the operations. So that was my personal preference, and there's nothing wrong with, and plenty of CEOs stay on or want to stay on, which is totally fine. But in addition to that, I wanted to make sure that our house was in the best shape possible. And by that, I mean our books. I'm a huge fan. There's a chapter in my book called Always Be Closing. And Always Be Closing usually refers to business deals, always be closing your next sale. I refer to always be closing it as your books, right? So you need to have a very, very buttoned down finance operation where your books can be closed no more than 7 days after the end of the month and at the end of the quarter. And that helps you stay incredibly organized, on top of your numbers, on top of your KPIs, make better decisions. But more importantly, it's going to raise the credibility that you build up with by an acquiring company, because the courting process is going to last months, some often quarters, and in a lot of cases, years. They're going to be continuously asking for information, right? Whether it's a private equity acquirer or a strategic acquirer. If you can produce that information regularly, really, really quickly after the month ends or the quarter ends, it's just going to build up the credibility on how you run your company. And the analogy I use in the book is like if you come up to a house that has an incredibly well manicured lawn and bushes outside versus one that isn't, it says a lot about the owner. They probably don't care about the insides of their house either if their outside is so messy and unkempt, right? So keep your house, keep that lawn mowed as much as possible in your organization.
Well, 100% because, private equity or other buyers, they're looking at hundreds of companies and, they get burned quite a bit, right? And so I think a early thing they look at is, are you keeping your books up to date, right? And obviously they look at the executive team because, they want to make sure that's crucial, right? Because a lot of times that's what one of your main things you're acquiring.
You had a chance to go to the big leagues, went to Pepperdine. And by the way, you did pretty well playing college ball and get a chance to go to the big leagues again. Just talk a little bit about your college career.
So I get to Pepperdine, and like I said, I was a high school All-American, and I get there. But Jeff, really for the first time in my life, everybody was as good as I was. Everybody was the elite players, and for the first time in my life, I really struggled with imposter syndrome. I was afraid to go out onto the field. I really doubted my ability, and I really struggled. And I remember this was in the preseason. We had our first sit down with our coaches, kind of like a performance review. And Coach Lopez called me in. I remember like this was yesterday. Calls me in and he says, "Lembi, sit down." So I sat down, and I was already struggling during the preseason. And before I had a chance to say anything, he said, "Hey, Damon, when I recruited you here to Pepperdine, I did so because I believed that you had the ability to be a great Division I third baseman, that you could hit in the middle of our lineup, and then you were going to help us reach our goal of a College World Series. But son, I made a mistake." And he crossed his arms and he sat back and he said, "You don't have what it takes to play Division I baseball."
Oh, man.
And so, Jeff, I was just shocked, right?
There's a knife to your heart right there.
And I was thinking to myself, how do I get out of here? How do I get on the first bus home and everything? Then he leaned forward, he pointed at me and he said, "That's not what I think. The problem is that's what's in your head. Our coaches and we see your talent. You have the ability. You can be great here. But until you get out of your own head and you get over the self-doubt that you have and you just go out on the field and play, there's nothing we can do for you, son. There's nothing you can do. You need to get off your butt and turn it around." And I'd like to tell you that I immediately left that office and it struck me and I turned it right around. I didn't actually. I got hurt in the preseason. I ended up leaving Pepperdine, going to a junior college for a year. And by the way, they won the College World Series that year that I left.
Sure.
Of course, but also that great vision that Coach Lopez had. But I was fortunate enough. I had a good junior college career. I got picked up by Arizona State, which is one of the top schools in the country. And I got a full ride there. And a lot of my friends and people I knew would say, "Hey, Damon, don't go to Arizona State. There are going to be 17 guys trying out for first base. Go to a small school. Go to St. Mary's. Go to some place you can play, finish up your baseball career and move on with life." And I said to myself, this is my last shot. So I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go all in. And I took the scholarship to Arizona State, and it was a game changer for me. I was the first guy on the field. I was the last one to leave. It helped me really develop a framework for overcoming imposter syndrome that I've used throughout my entire life. But I just outworked everybody really. And because of it helped me build up the confidence I needed to do to be successful. And I was able to, I was number 2 or 3 in the league in hitting and hit a home run in the College World Series. And we ended up losing to Georgia Tech and Oklahoma, but it was a tremendous experience.
Okay, I need a baseball card now because I love the hard workers. There are people that just have incredible athletic ability, and it looks like when they play the game, doesn't matter what the sport is, that it's just effortless for them. And then there are the guys and gals out there on the court or on the field that it is obvious they are giving it 100% effort, and they give every practice 100% effort because they don't have the talent that person next to them has. So they got to just work their way onto the active roster, work their way onto the field. And the people that work their way onto the field are always far more impressive to me than the guy or the gal that just has talent, a natural talent, and they can effortlessly do what everybody else out there has to spend an unlimited amount of hours working on.
And that natural talent, Jeff, catches up with you after a while.
Yeah.
I've seen some guys that I've played with and played against who would stroll out onto the field with their Jack in the Box bag, hungover from the night before, who in college could crush it. They were first round draft choices. They could crush it. But by the time they got to the minor leagues or to the big leagues, they didn't have the work ethic
They
or
didn't
the
have the ethic.
mindset,
Yep.
the work ethic, and they didn't have the mindset, and then they failed. So some of the most talented individuals I've ever played with never made it because they lacked the mindset and the competitiveness, because they just relied
Yeah,
on their natural talent their whole life.
absolutely. Yep. You described imposter syndrome. So you showed up to college sports with this imposter syndrome. It was so obvious that a guy like Coach Lopez noticed it. And by the way, I don't even know who this coach is, but I love this coach for recognizing something inside of you and calling it out so that you can become the great ball player that you need to be. That's the job of a coach. Um, but there are people that are in business. There are moms that are trying to look pretty and skinny and have a perfect family. And it's every single walk of life because of the pressures of social media that people are going through life with the imposter syndrome. Would you take a moment, let's back up for just a second, and describe what it took for you to get out of your own head, in Coach Lopez's words, and get over this imposter syndrome and just be the ball player, the best ball player that you can be?
Yeah, and you're right. Whether, like you said, it's a mother, or whether it's somebody who's recently promoted to a position
Yeah.
and they don't believe that they're qualified to be in, or they're they're struggling with limited beliefs or self-doubts. For me, what it really took was, it was really my last shot at Arizona State. That was it for me. And I said to myself, I have really nothing left to lose when it comes to baseball. So what I did is, and I've used this my whole professional career now too, is I kind of came up with a 3-step formula. Well, before the formula, first thing I had to do is label my fear. What am I really afraid of? What am I afraid of? I'm afraid of failing at baseball. Okay, wait, great. Worst case scenario, I just move on with my life. Okay, so it's not a big deal. So then step number 1 is really work hard. We just talked about this. There's no replacement for hard work.
Absolutely. 100%.
Absolutely. Number 2 is deliberate practice, focus. A lot of times, if there's something that you want to overcome or you want to do, it's easy to procrastinate, right? I mean, you can go do something else. You could turn on the TV, you could start scrolling on Instagram. But if you really want to overcome something, you need to have deliberate practice. And once you've worked hard and you put in a deliberate practice, when it's game time, so to speak, learn and let go. Just go on the field. Get out of your head. Stop thinking about techniques and, either how you're going to hit the ball or, how you're going to speak during your presentation, and just go for it. Do the best you can do. And you may do great. You may fall on your face, but so what? Take each opportunity as a learning opportunity. I'm a big believer that real growth happens through failure anyways. So learn from those failures. And by the way, you should be proud of yourself for trying, for getting out there and doing things, getting out of your comfort zone where so many other people are afraid to even take that chance. So work hard, put in a deliberate practice, and then go out, learn, and let go, and just give it your best shot.
Okay, I did not miss this word. There are people that are driving in traffic right now listening to this on the radio. They may have missed this word. I want to slow down for just a second and make sure that they don't miss what you're saying. Step 1 is work hard. And what we're both saying is there is no substitute for hard work. It doesn't matter if you are the smartest or the most talented person on the planet. You cannot achieve greatness without putting the work in too. Totally agree. But step 2 is not just practice. It's deliberate practice. And I wrote the word deliberate down when you were talking and underlined it, because there's a big difference than just going out on the ball field and practicing some drills or deliberately practicing some drills. I know the difference, but I want to make sure that the audience hears the difference. What is the difference between just going through some drills in practice and doing some deliberate practice?
Let's use it from a business perspective. Let's say that I've got to give a keynote presentation and it's 15 minutes long, and a lot of it is like second nature for me. But let's say that there's a piece of it that is difficult and that I've struggled with. Deliberate practice is really honing in and focusing in on what you're having a challenge with, putting in the extra effort, practicing that, having somebody role play with you on that, and really hammering away at that until you get better, asking for feedback and keep adjusting and getting it better and better. If you want to use a baseball analogy, for me, I struggled with hitting curveballs. So I'd put in deliberate practice where I'd have a coach throw me 150 curveballs one after the other, right? And until that's deliberate practice. It's really focusing in on what has challenged you the most. Yes, focusing on one thing, and maybe if you get better at that, then move to the next thing. But don't try to boil the ocean and try to do everything all at once. Just hone in on what you need to get better at.
I've never heard this phrase before, boil the ocean. I'm writing this down because I like that analogy. I did the Best Ranger competition for a few years, and I basically spent 4 years of my life preparing for this competition. The world's greatest military athletes, quite literally, it's open to everyone in the world, part of the NATO countries, and anyone who's gone through this, extreme level of military training. And before I did the Best Ranger competition the first time, I looked around at all of the other competitors and I was asking myself, why the heck am I here? I do not look like these guys. I do not have the skills that these guys have. But I put the work in, and I was very, very deliberate about the work. If I'm going to be able to succeed on this event, I need to practice this thing today. And when I get better at this, I'll move on to the next part of this event and the next part of this event. Anyway, I want to make sure that the audience hears step 3, because in my opinion, this separates the champions and the highly successful people from everybody else. There is a moment that I had to decide, Jeff, if you really want to know how this thing is going to turn out, the only way you're going to find out is if you just let it all, I use this analogy, let it all fly. When that gun goes off on Friday morning, you just let it all fly. And I don't know if I'm going to be in first place, last place, or DNF, did not finish, but I do know this, I'm going to let it all fly. And when it's over with, whatever happens next, I can at least say I held nothing back. Very few people are really willing, when it's game time, to absolutely go all in and let it all fly, because it's embarrassing, right? If it doesn't work out. I take the opposite approach. I love your step 3. The opposite approach for me is, if I let it all fly and it doesn't work out, I've got absolutely nothing to be ashamed about, because I just gave it my best and my best wasn't good enough.
So how do we, Jeff, get other people to understand that?
Yeah, the challenge here is, if I don't let it all fly, it doesn't matter where I finish. It doesn't matter if I finished in first place. If I didn't let it all fly, I never really got a chance to see what I was capable of. And I think you boiled the essence down to, are you really willing to take the risk? And the risk is, I'm going to give this one thing everything that I've got. And it may blow up in my face, but it's worth giving it everything that I've got. And by the way, I want to know what I'm truly capable of. And the only way to find that out is to let it all go, or let it all fly. And that, I think, is why people hold back. They're not willing to take the risk.
I agree with you. I think they're not willing to take the risk. And that's something I really learned more over the years, is just to stop comparing yourself to other people, stop worrying about what other people have to think about you, and just go out there, go all in, and like you just said, let it fly. And it's fun, because if you know that you've left it all on the table, then pat yourself on the back. Like, hey, you did it, man. You tried. That's and I try to teach my little daughter that, who's 6 years old. She had like this little bike race, and she's like, Daddy, what happens if I don't win? And I said, who cares? I said, like, honey, I said, Lucy, I don't care if you win. I just want you to go out there. I want you to do your very best, and I want you to have fun. And the funniest thing is, she did. She goes out there, she does it. I think she finished in like 4th or 5th place, and they gave her a medal.
Nice.
And she had her arms up in the air.
Like she just conquered the world, right?
Like she just conquered the world, because, as a parent, I think it's important for your audience and for your listeners. Yes, I want to win. I'm very competitive. I always want to win. But at the end of the day, I want my kids to go out there and give it their best shot. Leave it all on the field. Yeah.
And you and I think both can say this to people who are listening, who tend to hold back just a little bit because they're worried about whether or not they're good enough to be able to meet the challenge. The truth is, I would never, ever have been able to figure out what my real capabilities were if it wasn't for those times where I just decided, that's it, I'm going to let it all go and we're going to see what happens next. And I may be in the hospital tomorrow morning. I may be I may be on first place, with them, putting an award around my neck. I don't know, but I do know this. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to find out what I'm really capable of. And there's only one way to do that. There's no shortcut to this. You just have to decide, I'm going to let it all go, and we're going to see how this thing turns out.
And you won, right, in 1996?
Yes, but it took me, I should say to the audience, it took me 3 years. I finished fourth place in 94 and 95, and I was convinced, that's it. I'm a fourth place guy. I'm never going to be more than a fourth place guy. And then in 1996, I let it all fly again and ended up in first place. But it's just because I was willing to say, I'm going to give it everything that I got.
That's a great story, and it's so true. It's so true. And you can't really, again, getting back to the learning part of it, one, you learn what you're capable of, and two, you also learn how you can continue to get better and improve. And you can't do that if you don't leave it all out on the field.
By the way, a lot of times, just for the audience out there, you and I already know this, a lot of times it's not going to be good enough, and your best will not be enough, and you're going to fail. And probably the most powerful lessons in my life, every single one of them came from the times that I failed, not from the times that I succeeded. It was the times that I gave it everything that I had and I failed that really taught me lessons that have stayed with me for the rest of my life. So even those moments, I wouldn't trade them for the world.
I agree. I mean, you learn so much from failure. And I think one thing that's important out there, especially for parents, is I was talking to this guy I know, and his kid didn't make the baseball team. He tried out. He didn't make the baseball team. Instead of owning up to not making the baseball team, he blamed it on, the coach liked a different kid instead. Your kid didn't make the baseball team because you didn't work hard enough or he's just maybe not good enough right now, right? So, but the kid's 10 years old. There's plenty of time to get out there, but let's not start making excuses already for the situation. Let's get them in the right mindset. And like you said, fourth place, boom, you won.
Well, to put this into perspective, you'll remember this. There was a North Carolina high school basketball player that wasn't good enough to make the high school team and got cut from the team. And he could have just said, that's it, I'm not good enough. Or he could have just blamed it on the coach. The coach doesn't like me. But instead, he decided to go back and start shooting hoops and start, working some drills and start practicing harder so that next year he did make the team. You know who I'm talking about, right?
I texted my friend that article.
No, you didn't.
Michael, I swear, I'm not making that up. I texted him that article. I said, did you know that Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team?
Yeah. And Michael Jordan could have said, you know what? It's not good. I'm not good enough. Or my coach is a jerk and he doesn't like me. Yep. Instead, Michael Jordan did the work. He deliberately practiced. And then when he came back next year, he let it all go. And he became the greatest basketball player in history. And probably because he got cut from the team. Had he not got cut, who knows? Maybe he never becomes the greatest, maybe one of the greatest, but not the greatest. For all of you LeBron James fans out there, I still believe Michael Jordan's the greatest basketball player to ever live.
Hands down. And the other thing I think that Michael Jordan did is he took that being cut, and instead of taking that energy and being negative about it, he took it and he used that as his incentive and his passion and his fire to hit the gym every day. And like you said, I think that's probably one of the reasons why he's the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, you and I talked about some of the elements of, goal setting, clarity of vision, then goal prioritization, actionable roadmap, and then kind of overcoming obstacles. So, I kind of want to start with clarity of vision in, how do you go about defining a compelling vision for yourself, or even your organization for that matter, that's aligned with your core values and passion. So, before you're even kind of going into that journal and thinking about, okay, this is what I'm going to do or what I'm working towards, how have you set that vision for yourself, or how can people do that?
Well, I think first of all, and this is the very first section of the journal, is mindset, because that is the key, the foundation to everything, right? And so when I talk about mindset, it's knowing yourself being very well and being self-aware. So knowing what your core values are, knowing what motivates you to make decisions. So, and I call those my internal rules. Okay. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. So my number one internal rule, also based off another book called The Go-Giver, is to give value first. Okay. And then my second internal rule is to make all my decisions in alignment with my core values with the potential to better, myself or others. That's not word for word, but it's pretty close. Basically, all my decisions are made based on my core values. So how can I make those decisions if I don't know what my core values are? So I had to get real and raw with what motivates me. Okay. And there's several, one of the things that I did in the journal that I think is so critical is all these resources that I used to generate these strategies and processes and bundle them up for you. I list them. Okay. So when you look at core values, the core values section, there's a website that's free that you can go to, that you can work on to really identify your core values. And it's pretty cool the way it does it, because it's asking you to choose, do you like this or this? Neither option's bad, but which one motivates you, right? And so my core values, and I want to make sure that I tell you them in order. Authenticity. So, and that's one thing that I feel like really propels me forward in my vision, is that I'm going to show up the same every time I show up. Growth is huge for me. I am a consummate student. I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly doing something to engage my brain and work those wires, right? So you got to exercise it. Spirituality. I'm not talking religion. I'm talking spirituality. I'm talking connectedness. That's really important to me. Inner harmony. Now, I don't know how many of you know this inner harmony, but this is, and this again is related to spirituality, but the inner harmony is being at peace with yourself. And when you're at peace with yourself, those external forces don't affect you as much as they once would. Okay. And then my fifth core value that I want to share is meaningful work. It is absolutely critical to me that what I do has an impact. In my journaling and my meditation over the last couple of weeks, the word impact has come up over and over and over and over again. And I am one of those people, I believe in synchronicities, right? And when something keeps coming up and pointed out to you over and over again, it's time to pay attention. So now that you know a couple of my internal rules, some of my core values, I think that my vision is going to make a whole lot more sense, which you read part of it earlier. So, and again, I want to read it word for word. My vision is to raise the consciousness of the world by helping those I touch learn to co-create their own reality through managing perceptions through choice. We all get a choice.
Yeah, I love that. It's amazing what being really thoughtful and intentional, right, about your values, how that then translates out into everything you do, right? The goals you set, the vision you have, the person you show up as, and you just emanate that. So yeah, that's so powerful. Thank you, Casey. And then the book you mentioned was The Go-Giver, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, great. I'll share resources with our audience as well after the session. Can you share, and you touched on this a little bit, but can you share a personal or professional example of how having a clear vision has, positively impacted your goal setting journey? So how it's helped you, right, set the goal of even creating the journal or, growing your podcast. Anyways.
So, and I will talk about the journal a lot, because for me, I'm not going to say it's my biggest accomplishment. I raised a kid, that's got to count for something. But and he's okay. But the journal really is probably the greatest example of having a vision for me and seeing it through. Without that clarity of vision, without that knowing what I wanted to accomplish, goal setting is one of six sections of this journal. They're all interrelated. I refer to it as a holistic journal because it covers everything from mindset to finance. So definitely having that clarity of vision, wanting to impact the world and help them, live a more, just a happier life because you have that inner awareness is really what has kept me going with this journal.
You've got me bought in. You're talking. You've convinced me that I can't just be endlessly resourceful and resilient and like, well, I'm special. I'll just work it out, and I can't hang my identity around being other people's rock all the time, or I'm really going to set myself up for failure. And I also can't just rely on the workplace to manage my mental health and burnout for me because the cost is asymmetric. I'm going to pay a much higher price than they are. So I'm bought in. And this is the point where I feel like a lot of other books that I've read now trot out very familiar advice without much extra. Now, you do acknowledge that the advice, the researched things that you can do to feel better they're known. We know what they are. But of course, the problem is just knowing it and trying to do it. Even if you do it, you still don't see the results that you want to get. So can you walk us through like, what are those things that we kind of know are going to make us more well? And then just start to get into your approach for how we make this more than just those New Year's resolutions that we don't do or we do and feel like they don't work and we give up.
I know. We've all been there, really, about so many things. Yeah. And in the show notes, I'll send you, Darren, a link to worksheets that are free. They're on my website. You don't even have to have the book to use them. They're so self-explanatory. So if you feel like, just playing around with these exercises, that'll be very easy to do. So first, yes, the pieces we know from research, and I as I will say this often, if I am with an audience, I say, okay, so let's list these things, and they will get there. It's very easy, but just to save time, we're looking at exercise. Yes, 3 types: cardio, strength training, meditative type activity like meditation, yoga, tai chi, all of these beautiful things. Second category, they're not in that order. I'm just naming them that way, but would be nutrition. Very direct impact on our resilience and psychological health. We tend to think it's just physical. Absolutely not. Strong impact. And we'll see even more of this from the research in the next few years. Sleep, we do want 7 to 8 hours. And then spending time in relationships with people with whom we enjoy spending time with. And there are others: time in nature, volunteer work. If you're spiritual, investing in your spirituality, many others as well. So we know what the things are. We usually trust the research. It would be great if we had them. We don't have them because the schedule is full or overflowing. So it's hard. So what I'm saying is we need to be strategic. And here's the parallel, right? So in a business, if you and I, Darren, we're in a business together and we just had a great idea for a new product, would we just say, oh, we have a great idea, a new product, let's launch it? Or would we say, we have a great idea for your next product, let's see how this connects with our values as an organization, where we're going, how we want to be known for in the market, who else is offering anything close to this, who's buying it, how much are they paying for it, what forces in the future might impact the demand for this. We would do the whole thing. So we would be looking at the values, the forces, the context. And what I'm saying is, let's do the same thing here when looking at our resilience. And so what I'm saying at a high level, and we can dive into any aspects of this, is let's step back and look at our individual values. Let's look at our actual, and I really underline, bold, italics, actual context is. We can talk more about it because we tend to underestimate the demands and overestimate the supply, which means it's not actual. We should look at the context, the forces around us that are just there, so that we create a plan that is not just what research says, but it's sure we want to listen to research and we want to translate this in a way that's realistic in your context today. So your context today allows for this kind of plan. Your context in 3 months from now may need to change. And that's great. We just adapt the strategy.
Yeah, I like that you have the plan B and like different, because like you said, on day 8, things could be different. And sometimes day 8 is going to be totally different than you ever even guessed. And you need to have a plan that you can update, because sometimes you go through cycles where you are actually way busier than you normally are. I mean, I think that tends to be like, we're just always saying that, but there can be real periods where you might be under a particular kind of stress and your plan needs to be able to adjust.
Absolutely.
Because what happens otherwise is people like try something and then one time, like you actually say you need a flexible plan. If you and I think a lot of people don't understand that. They think, if I'm going to make a new habit, I have to do it exactly the same every single day, or it won't work. But you kind of say the opposite.
Well, I say combination. And that's what actually research says also. So it's still true that the more we can create on habits specifically, the more we can create some form of stability, of removing a decision point from our brain, the better. So I don't need to think about it. Every morning I do 5 minutes of deep breathing, for example, or doing my stretches or whatever you decide. You remove the decision point and it makes the habit stick and easier to stick. So there is all kinds of good reasons to have that stability. And it used to be that research was only about this, saying you need to stick and that's the way to win. Research has continued, of course, and now is adding the yes and you need flexibility. So people who were a bit flexible on, yes, I'm going, say, to the gym 3 times a week for half an hour, and we're saying, and if for whatever reason I cannot do a certain day at the gym for half an hour, I will go into the gym and only do 10 minutes and come back. Or if I cannot do this because I'm traveling for work, I will be walking to the gate that is the furthest away from mine at least 3 times before I sit down. Whatever, you've transformed it in ways that you are maintaining the habit in a different version of it. And that does a number of things. It maintains the habit, yes. It also contributes to building your sense of self-efficacy, that belief that you can influence this because you see yourself doing it. And the beauty with this, it's similar to people who do big physical challenges, triathlons and all kinds of things. Part of what they do when they do this is they build their sense of self-efficacy. Yes, in the particular task they're doing, the triathlon, say, but it expands because then you build your belief you could do tough things in other areas and in the future, and you're building agency when you do this. So it goes in all kinds of very positive directions. But yes, point is having flexibility with your plan is key.
Is a big deal. So if I review a little bit, we've got the idea that we need to make, because I like your business analogy, although I think there are a lot of businesses that should follow the steps that don't. But let's just go ahead with this idea. Like, absolutely, does this match our brand? Does this match our values? Is this how we, should we be positioning ourselves in the marketplace around this? So when you talk about values, connecting the new behaviors that you want to build, you talk about both connecting it to your values, and you use a broad definition of values. And you also talk about having a very clear goal as you go through these worksheets in the process, which is, it's not everything, because you can put so many things in here. It's about what's going to help you build resilience specifically.
That's right. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what do you mean by values? Because you have that broad definition for it. So as people are sort of marching through this process.
Correct. I made it a bit broad because the idea behind taking a moment to reflect on what I call your values here is different people will have different language around this. Connecting with my purpose, what's meaningful for me, my why, however you want to call this, but it connects with what makes you very unique. And that's critical, because then we're moving away from the list of things we should all be doing would be great, blah, blah, blah. And now we're connecting it to, but what's most important for Darren specifically? And in fact, that's how I define values here. I say you could use values as in formal values, like I value integrity, for example. I value, but you could also just put there what's just most important for you in life. If nature and mountains are important for you, they go on the list. And so what that creates, and I often encourage people to have a bit of volume there, like, at least 10, 15 words that come to mind. so you can have even more clarity. You have some, obviously. Most people have a few ideas of the first top 3 or something like this. But if you sit down and really aim at 10 or 15, you're going to sit there a bit longer, and you'll find ingredients that may be smaller, just like when you do a recipe and you have vanilla. There's not a lot of vanilla, but it makes a great, nice, big difference if you like vanilla. I do. I always usually double the amount. But the point is, if you go with a longer list, you will find smaller ingredients that are also still very important for you. And that's core, critical first step to look at your values for that reason, because it will connect with what speaks to you.
It's a little bit like that thing about gratitude. Sometimes do this exercise with people where they talk about what they're grateful for. And they always start with the things that they are genuinely grateful for. But there are things, like my family and my health and stuff. But if you make them keep going, it's like, oh, I'm grateful for the light bulb that I actually walk. You get to, it's actually, there's a lot of value in going down the path to even just small, unexpected things. And not just, it kind of surprises you into appreciating things in a fresh way. So that reminds me of similarly.
But it's so true. Anytime we stay a bit longer in the reflection, we're going to find more. And the more that we find is often the gems, the colors, the nuances that get us to something even more unique. So I think that's what you see in this exercise on gratitude. And I think you're right. That's a bit of how you get to a deeper degree of richness if you take that time, which again, I'm not talking about hours. We're talking about just stay there 10 minutes as opposed to 30 seconds and you'll get it. Like I often say, seriously, this book, you could read in a, from one coast to the other type flight. If you're staying on it, you'll get through the book and be able to actually do the exercises and get out with your plan.
Yeah. So I'm looking at my resilience plan now, and a couple of the things that I think would be good for the listeners to hear is you talk about you got your priority values list. You also talk about the supply demands inventory. Again, we were sort of bringing business in and just thinking of it in this very practical way about supply and demand when it comes with your energy levels and your resilience. And then you talk about the quadrants of context, and you use all this to build a very simple pillars formula. Can you walk people through that just a little bit?
Yes. So high level, we do our list of values that we were talking about. That reflection on sources of supply and demand, again, distilled it to something very doable, practical, table, 2 columns, demands column, supply column. You're listing what's in your context there. And I guide you through making sure we catch your blind spots, where you're going to disregard or overstate or whatever. Very realistic in the current context. And then the third tool that I've brought forward just to help us make sure we see the overall current context is it's a version of a SWOT analysis. In business, we would do a SWOT, meaning we're looking at strength. So for S, W for weaknesses in the internal context of a business. And in the external context of a business, we would be looking at the opportunities and the threats in the environment. So I've translated this for us as individual. So for you, Darren, currently, what are your just natural personality strengths that are helping with your resilience? Let's say you're interested in it. So it's natural, it's easy, you're that guy. Okay.
Yeah.
And weakness, maybe you get interested in so many things that you say yes to everything. It's becoming a challenge.
Yeah.
So, and then on the external side, what types of opportunities do you have? Well, you actually live in an area where you could easily step out and go for a walk if you wanted to, as opposed to having to drive or take transit. And maybe a challenge in your current context is that you actually receive more demands than is actually possible, and you're not clear yet on how to, which ones to say yes to or no, so you're stuck. That would be an example. But you're doing that analysis with more than one example in each quadrant, but it gives you can see, right? Even now, as we start saying this, we get a better sense. And I even invented all this, everyone. I did not ask Darren in advance. So just,
yes. Yeah. Pretty close, but still. Yeah.
But, I picked these because, many people I work with also, and myself, have experience. But once you have this, then you can identify 3 directions that would be logical, that would make sense for you to invest in. And then I usually say 3 because we don't want more than 3 to 5 pillars usually in a strategy, and then actions for each of them. And that's it.
That's great. And that is, again, one of the things that's so nice here is that, I mean, it's elegance, right? Anytime you develop a formula that's good, you want it to be kind of E equals MC squared, and that there should be kind of a simplicity and an elegance to it. So this does have that. But you also, and just to be clear, when you talk about supply and demand, you're talking about essentially like how resourced am I, or versus how many demands are on my time and my knowledge and things.
Correct.
Right?
Yes. Very much looking at not just the work ones, not just the ones you don't want to have, like, the big picture, so that, because the overachievers will minimize how many demands they have. They'll say, oh yeah, well, that doesn't count. Of course, I'm going to help my friend who's leaving a relationship. It goes on the list.
Yeah.
And then on the supply side, they'll say, oh yeah, I'm that person. I go for walks with my partner 5 times a week. Great. How many times last week? Oh, well, last week things happened. We didn't go.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it doesn't go on the list then.
Yeah. You even talk about how the demand can be something is like really great. Like you're seeing a bunch of friends, like you like to see people and you're seeing a bunch of people all the time. Going away with my family or something like that, the big extended family, but that can be a demand too, because you're not if it's not giving you enough time to sleep, then you're paying a penalty right there. You need like the full recharge. And I think we just forget that we need those things.
We do. And it does connect with the need to have flexibility in our plans, sometimes even 2 versions of the same plan. Like for many people, there will be, hopefully, these days or maybe in a few months, a vacation. Vacation is a different context. We can't just say, oh, well, it's vacation, so of course everything's going to be fantastic and I'll come back refreshed. Hello, we've all been there, coming back wishing to work because work will be more relaxing than whatever that vacation was. And so, but thinking in advance about what that context looks like and thinking, okay, if we do all these activities every day, it's positive, exciting, goes well, that's great. And I'm feeling my battery is very low these days. So if I'm doing this for those 6 days that we'll be away, I'm not going to come back refreshed, even though they're fabulous. And I'm in this wonderful place that you've not been before, that you want to see as much as you can of it. It's not the only goal. You also have the goal to come back refreshed. So let's adapt. Right?
Yeah. I've got, like, can you walk us through like what a resilience plan might look like when you get down to what those pillars are?
Yes.
And then especially how does that sort of process of iterating it and being flexible with it, like what might that look like?
Yes. So, and of course, each plan will be individual for each person. I'll give you examples based on individuals that I've worked with, that kind of thing. For many, as they've explored their values, they've realized relationships were very important for them. For many, they've realized they are facing lots of demands, putting lots of their time in all kinds of places. The value relationship would serve as a source of supply, but it's not there because they're working or they're not there. And then looking at their context where the demands are so large that it's making it difficult for them to implement things they would want to. So sometimes this kind of, I'm skimming very quickly over how that could look like. But then if we're looking at, say, 3 potential pillars, it may be that one pillar is going to be called relationships. It may be that another pillar will be called boundaries. It may be that another pillar is going to be called assessing time better. And because they've realized on that 3rd one, for example, that they tend to underestimate how long anything's going to take. So they are either late or they're still on time, but they've created an amount of pressure in themselves to make it that is just so demanding and stressful for themselves. So maybe there will be one action on that 3rd pillar, which is, at least once a week when I'm about to do something, I think this is going to be a 10-minute thing, start the timer and see how long that was actually. And then you'll realize this is actually a half an hour thing. Isn't that interesting? Next time I plan, I'm not going to think that this is 10 minutes and think I have time for lunch, because this is half an hour. That's the time I had for lunch. And now I'm not eating. No, it doesn't help. On the pillar, and where we call it boundaries, for example, maybe, yes, I'm wanting to be very responsive to my team, and I value relationships. And I've noticed that when a family member calls me, or I'm in interaction with family member and work calls me outside of work hours, and I'm not, say, on call for crisis, but they're just calling me, I tend to pick up. Could I experiment with the behavior, unless it is the expectation? And there's a different solution to this. But if it is not the expectation that you could listen to the voicemail in 5 minutes, we stay here. We're not interrupting with answering the phone. We appropriately, after a while, say, I'm going to just need to check that message. Now what we've done is we've aligned my actions with my value, right? So that's an example of a good boundary. And on the relationship front, it depends on each person's individual context, for example, but I don't know, is there an opportunity that if you're working from home, not in a Zoom meeting or a podcast with Darren, and so therefore your door is open or, cracked open, and a family member comes in, can we, I don't know, get into the habit of standing up and stepping outside of the office to have that few minutes conversation, as opposed to fingers still on the computer, hello, having a conversation.
Yeah.
If we value the family, that kind of action tells them they're number one, gives you the context to be fully focused, as opposed to corner of your eye still seeing what's coming through here. Yeah. And you've aligned your behavior with your values. So simple. See, none of these things take a lot of time. They are aligned, and create your plan.
That is one of the things I really appreciate. And I think people don't fully understand. A lot of these actions are quick. I mean, you have some actions in there that are literally like a 30-second action. Yeah. And I think people even don't realize often, I'm going to start running and I'm just going to only run, half a mile. And you get out there the first day, it's, I feel great. And you run 2 miles. You're actually kind of hurting your plan by doing that. You want to build things in small chunks and let it be a small chunk, and start to realize the power of those small actions and how they can add up. And it makes it much easier then to adjust when suddenly the context for you changes.
Yes, you do want to slow down that tendency to always do more faster kind of thing. Yeah. And a way to think of it is that, let's say you've done that first step, it went great, that was easy, you feel good, great. The reality, if you've done your thinking about your context, is that your days don't look exactly the same every day. As you are in a leadership role, especially the junior leadership roles, you're bombarded by demands by your team all day, every day. That's what you do. It still is to some degree as you progress in different leadership roles, but definitely as an early manager, early leader, that will be very much part of it. So then your task number one is not to do this thing longer or more often. It's to get to a point where you can sustain it no matter what. Yes. That's what you're wanting to do first. So it stays even in the waves of demands that are coming in all day, every day. Now do this first, maintain it for the next few months. And in a few months, evolve your plan, yes. But for right now, just let it be solid while the context goes through its changes.
There's something very empowering about that idea, because I think for many of us, we're just looking, I just have to do all this to get to this level. And then once I get there, I'll figure it out. And you're saying, no. From the very beginning, build something that's sustainable, that you can maintain. And it doesn't mean that you won't show up and be a star team player and a great collaborator and, whatever that new word for rock is for people that we want to come up with. But you can still be that person, but you want to build in longevity, something you can maintain right from the beginning. And it's a different approach, and it's a less desperate approach. It's kind of a very empowered way to think about things.
Empowered, yes, it's a word people use, and grounded, and people will say that too. Freeing, others. I've seen this as well.
Yeah.
And you could see it, right? Even talking about it, you're like, yeah, look, it's you
Yeah.
can actually do this.
Yeah.
If you do this, you will see yourself doing it, which brings us back to our self-efficacy. And yes, that sense that especially in a context where so many things are changing around us at various pace and all kinds of things happening, it's important to make sure we do take the control where we have it. It's in our hands. And so we do want to invest in this.
Yeah.
What was it about basketball after college, right? Because my story, like I was kind of mentioning to you, is I was, I actually, I played at Arizona State. I had a great career there. And I always thought, Dre, that if you succeeded at one level, you got to go to the next level. And I was drafted previously, but out of college, I didn't get drafted. So unlike you, I just kind of quit and gave up. You know what I mean? Which I look back on now and I'm kind of disappointed with myself. And it was a great learning lesson. But for you, coming out of a D3 school, not, obviously you're not going to get drafted. Then I heard this where you have to drive all the way across, a 15, 16-hour drive, pay money to go do it, and then cold call all of these coaches. What was it about basketball that you were so passionate about?
It wasn't so much basketball. It was the competition. And it was the just proving myself in the area that I had chosen to focus on. So at that point, let's say about around age 15, 16, that's when I started thinking about what do I want to be as an adult? When I become an adult, what am I going to do? And I knew I wasn't going to be this amazing student who was able to leverage my great academic performance into a career. I didn't want to do that. I have a sister who's a year older than me. She was 2 grades ahead of me because she was a really good student. She had skipped a grade in elementary, and she had kind of leveraged her academic excellence into a career. I knew I didn't want to do that because I was not academically excellent. So school was out of it. My dad is into music. He's a musician. Music is probably his real passion. He's into sports, but music is his real passion. I didn't really pick up the musical gene, so I wasn't going to do that. My mom's an educator, so she was more like just go to school, get a degree. So I was trying to figure out what will I be, where am I going to go here? And sports seems to be the outlet for me. Basketball just happened to be the last stop on the path. So I tried a little baseball, tried a little football, and those weren't it. Never played. I didn't try a whole lot of sports. And where I come from, there's a few sports. There's a tennis court next to the basketball court that nobody ever uses. There's one guy from my neighborhood who played tennis. He went to college playing tennis. Nobody else ever played. So I don't even know who he was practicing against because nobody played. Baseball, of course, you had us playing baseball, but most players from my neighborhood don't play baseball. You have football, but you need people around to practice football. So I never really got into it. Never played soccer. Never did anything like swimming or any other sports. So basketball was like the last resort. And coming from where I come from, that's what everybody does. They play basketball. And if you don't make it in basketball, you're probably not playing sports. That's pretty much how it is.
Let me ask you this question just to get a little sidetracked because, our core audience are, entrepreneurs, leaders, senior level executives. And so obviously we want to get practical advice and tips to grow their career. But Dre, what's more important to me is like they all have kids. A lot of them have kids. As an athlete, do you think kids these days should specialize in sports or kind of be like me and you where we played a wide range of sports?
It's a great question. It seems that people are leaning towards the specialization because they feel like they're in an arms race against all the other kids. While at the same time, one of the things that made a lot of us from our era great athletes is that we played a little bit of everything. So you take someone like Kobe Bryant, for example, he played a lot of soccer, and that led to him having really good footwork. Hakeem Olajuwon in basketball, also the same thing. Michael Jordan was a really good baseball player, at least he says he was, and he decided to focus on basketball. So a lot of athletes coming up who became great, they didn't specialize so much in one sport because that can lead to early injuries, it can lead to burnout. I hear from athletes all the time in different sports who email me and they tell me like, hey, my parents had me in such and such sport. And I hear everything from horseback riding, believe it or not, to ice skating, to football. And they don't even like the sport, but their parents want them to play the sport. And they're trying to figure out, Dre, how do I tell my parents that I don't want to do this? And I'm trying to help them like kind of third party. So I understand why people are doing it. And nowadays, the resources to specialize, you have a 5-year-old, the resources to specialize that 5-year-old into one sport are available now. Whereas back in the 1990s, there weren't many resources for this stuff. So you just sent your kid outside, just go play. If they decide to play a sport, they would pick one. But now you can kind of like lay out the path for him before the kid's even born. So I understand it, but my answer to your question then is let the kid figure out what they want to be. I have a child, he's 2 years old, my son. If he wants to play basketball, but he has to take it seriously because I'm going to hold him accountable to take it serious. If he wants to play, I'll be there. And if he doesn't want to play sports at all, that's fine as well. One thing he is going to understand is entrepreneurship and business. That's more important to me than sports.
Absolutely. It's so important. And I'm right there with you because people always come to me, hey, I want my kid to be a D1 baseball player like you. So I have him year round. I'm like, do the exact opposite. Play all kinds of different sports, work on these different muscles, meet different kids and collaborate. But at the end of the day, I don't really care. And I want to, we're going to get into your framework. I don't really care. I just want them to work hard and compete and be disciplined, all of those.
It's the discipline, it's the mindset. Those are the things that you get from sports, because even if I try to push my kid into playing a sport, there's no telling how tall is he going to be. What if he's 5'9"? He ain't making it to the NBA. That's probably not going to happen. And if he doesn't have the talent, then he's not going to make it in sports. And if he doesn't have the passion and the drive to wake up and do the workouts to the point that I'm waking him up to go to the gym instead of him waking me up to go to the gym, it's not going to happen. So you can't force that upon somebody, even your own kids. And I have come across many parents and kids who are trying that because they see this, I don't know what you want to call it, this trophy of having a kid who becomes an athlete. But the kid has to want it more than anybody else does.
The kid has to want it more than anybody else does. And another thing I see, and I'm curious to see what you think about this, is there's these traveling teams, whatever, and sometimes the kids don't make it. And the parents like to place the blame on the coach or external reasons, where I try to tell them, hey, you got to suck it up. And the kids got to realize that they got to compete. Like with Dre, you were cut 3 years in a row, your first day on the high school basketball team, right?
Yes.
I just think that there's too much victim mentality a lot of times when it comes to mindset and kids growing up these days.
So what they say, Damon, is that tough times make for strong people make for easy times, and easy times make for weak people. And I believe the society that we're in today, whether we're talking sports or anything else, we're just a weak society. Right now, our society is extremely weak. We have a lot of people looking for ways to be victims rather than holding themselves accountable. Because back then, in let's say the 90s, playing sports, you didn't make the team, then it was, hey, you're just not good enough to make the team. Nobody was blaming the coach. I mean, at least not. It wasn't a widespread mainstream thing to go blame the coach. You might be mad at the coach for not picking you, but you use that energy, that disappointment of not making the team, and you channeled that into working on your game so you could get better, instead of channeling it into, well, let me just complain because obviously there's nothing wrong with me. It's just something wrong with him or her who didn't put me on the team. So for me, I'm glad I went through those challenges of not making the team, because there's a couple things. First of all, it helps build mental toughness and discipline within you. Those lead to confidence. And also it gives me the cachet to tell an athlete these days, or anybody else for that matter, okay, you didn't get the outcome that you wanted. Yes, maybe the people who were doing the choosing did make a mistake. It's possible people can make mistakes. At the same time, we start the conversation and we end the conversation in the same place, which is in the mirror. We have to look at you, because you control you. You don't control the decisions that other people make. You only control what you do. So let's focus on you here, because that's the only thing we can do something about.
There's stuff that's outside of your control. You can't do anything about that. There's constraints you got to work within, right? So you got to look in the mirror and figure out how to make the most out of it.
Going back to being the best you can be, you can learn the lessons from that by reflecting on it. I told somebody one time the importance of reflection, and I believe in reflection 100%. And I've added it to my daily life, not just my work life. And it will change your life. It really will. But I said, you got to reflect on the things you did. Because and what brought it up was somebody said, well, I learned from so many experiences. I said, no, you didn't. You didn't learn from any experience, because experience is full of emotions. You learned from the reflection on that experience. Take yourself out of it, take a step back and say, what was I supposed to do? What did I do? How can I get better at it? And even if you're successful, you can always get better at it. So every time I did an event, every time I did a major thing, I reflected. And then I thought to myself, well, if it works there, why doesn't it work on my daily life? And so, I'm no surprise, 40 years of service to the Army. I'm a guy of routines. I believe in routines inside of routines. So I start my day and end my day the exact same way every single day, no matter where I am in the world, no matter what I'm doing. I get up, I pour my cup of coffee, I sit down, and I listen to the daily mass. I read a couple of chapters of the Bible, and then I do my daily prayers. Now, I may not have a whole lot of influence on what happens after that, but I started the day right. Then I go through my day, and at the end of the day, before I go to bed at night, I read something of whatever I'm reading, whether it's a blog, an article, a chapter of the book that I'm reading, whatever it is. I read something every day. I do my journal, because I do a journal every day. I have since I was 10 years old. Every day I write in my journal. And then the last thing I do before I go to bed is I reflect on my day. What was I supposed to do? What did I do? How can I get better at it tomorrow? And I will tell you, if you do that, it will change your life. I promise you. Now, you got to be honest. You got to be honest with yourself. That's key. I mean, you can play games all you want. That's not going to help you. You got to be honest. What did I do? What should I have done? And how can I get better at it? And you got to be honest. And if you are, it will change your life.
What you just said there is so key about being honest, because I think a lot of times people aren't honest with themselves. They want to play the victim. They want to blame somebody else. So if you're reflecting back and you're blaming somebody else on it, then you're just wasting your time, is really what
Absolutely.
you're doing. You know?
You're not learning anything from that.
Not learning anything. So, Oak, let's say I'm somebody who doesn't have any routines, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this sounds great. But, having all these routines like Oak does, I don't think I can get there. What is one step? What's the first step they could take to start on that journey?
Yeah, well, start small. Just one simple thing, Growing up, I never made my bed, ever. Didn't happen. Went in the Army, guess what?
Every day. Yeah.
Started making my bed. Yeah. That's where it starts. One thing. Just pick one thing and start that as your routine. And then when you get that down, and it is a routine, it's habit at that point, pick another thing and work on that. And I think if you approach it that way, then I think you'll be okay. And look, we are all creatures of habit. Okay, anybody who tells you they aren't's lying to you. We are all creatures of habit. You just got to pick the habits that are good and then turn them into a routine. And again, I'm a firm believer in routines inside a routine. So like when I'm home, I do my morning routine in the exact same place, doing the exact same thing every morning. I sit in my chair. It's the only thing in my house that is mine.
I'm the same way. I'm the same way.
I know my place, and I do. Yeah. This isn't my place. That chair is mine. I mean, and then at night I'm sitting in my office. I do my reading in here. I do my journal in here, and I do my reflection. And I think if you get into those type of habits where you're doing the same thing the same way, it does become a habit. And then you can work on the bad habits that you have to try to get rid of, but you try to instill habits that are good for you, and you turn them into routines. So that if there have been times where when I'm traveling, sometimes I got to be at the airport at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, I don't have time to do all my routine in the morning before I leave for the airport. But as soon as I get there, I stop, and during the 2 hours I'm waiting for my flight, then I'll read a couple chapters of the Bible or say my prayers or whatever. And the mornings I have to do that, it messes me up that I didn't do them all at the same time in the same place, the same way. So you'll get to the point where your mind will drive you to make routines, to do it every single day. And it will get there. It may take a month or so, but you will get there, I promise you.
No, I think that's it's great. And I like what you said about starting small.
I have to imagine that this would be true for you, but a lot of what people are thinking about who come to the podcast, I think, are also professional development. And you've talked a lot about kind of like personal development and valuing that, like how instead of, when you talk about starting the day, It's not necessarily like, go and get your focus time and do your work then, or eat the frog, do the hardest work. You're talking about like a recipe for your own sort of wellness, so that you have a springboard for the rest of the day that allows you to accomplish things. I guess what I'm talking about, do you think that like spending this kind of attention on your personal life leads to that 800% professional growth? How do you balance these two things together?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. You have to continue to grow and develop as a leader, right? As an individual, in order to be able to properly lead others. And when we can properly lead others and we can teach them how to fish, right, then our businesses can be successful. So one of the principles in the legacy titles, the 12th principle actually, is to teach your people life skills, not just job skills. Yeah. And that really is the marinade for growing a business 800%, which I had the opportunity to do at a car dealership out here in Paris, Kentucky. We grew 800% in just under 6 years. And the real magic and chemistry to it was that we were developing people. We were growing as individuals, and then we were developing the people around us. And so they were more successful, which made the business successful, right? Yeah. I have a lot of clients that own car dealerships, and they hire me for high-level masterminds and whatnot. And one of the very first thing that we teach them is for them to do the morning 5 routines, the very first thing that we teach. But then it also applies to how your business starts its day, right? A lot of businesses are slow starters. People kind of trickle in when they trickle in. People are grabbing their coffee. Maybe they're eating some breakfast in the morning. Like, if you look at a lot of the ways a lot of businesses start, they don't get out the gate quick. And so that's something we talk about there too, is if you change the way you start your day, it makes a massive impact in your business. So how can you start your business every day where it injects people with energy and passion, and we can develop people first thing in the morning while their brains are fresh, right? And we use an acronym. I'm all about making things really simple. So we use an acronym called LEAD, which is LEADD, LEADD, and it stands for listen, encourage, advise, and develop daily. That's the extra D is daily.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Listen, encourage, advise, and develop, and do it daily. So morning meetings, for example, I teach my clients how to put together a daily morning meeting. And in that meeting, they're the first one in the room so they can listen to what their people have to say. Then they start the meeting by encouraging the behaviors they want to see more of, right? Great job getting a Google review. Great job picking up trash in the parking lot. Great job closing 3 deals yesterday. Whatever behaviors I want to see more of, we encourage. Then we advise. Hey, we need to work on this. We need to work on this. There's this going on. You need to work on this. You need to work on this. And then we develop, which is no one should ever walk out of your meeting not knowing something they didn't know walking in. That's the intention behind it, right? We want to develop the people. So whether we're developing them with wealth management, or we're giving them sales skills, or developing them on a product, whatever the development piece is, we want to make sure there's always a development piece. And when we do this daily, if we spend the first 30 minutes of our day as a business listening, encouraging, advising, and developing, dude, production goes through the roof all day long, man. It's amazing how it works. So these things apply in our personal lives, and they also apply into our business. And as we're developing ourselves and developing people, your business can't help but grow.
For leaders who are watching this, who wrote down all that, one question I have about those meetings is to ensure that something was learned, I guess, or they walk away for the development. Do you go around the room and ask people one takeaway or one thing that they're going to do differently, or at the end of those meetings? How do they go from that meeting to take the action moving forward?
Yeah. So obviously interaction, having people included and getting takeaways, things like that is always great, right? We want a spirit of collaboration. With that said, it is the responsibility of the leader to make sure that we have planned, right? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So like, what is the plan for the year of development for your people. Now, sometimes when I say that, my clients will be like, whoa, I got to train people for a year. I'm like, no, you got to train people for the next 20 years. But we're going to start with 1 year, and let's break that down into 52 weeks.
Yeah.
So what are 52 things in your field, whatever field you're in, what are 52 things that you've learned along the way that were valuable for you as a leader in the organization, that helped you be successful, that you wish you would have known earlier or sooner, right? Now let's take those 52 things and we'll just train on one of them a week. Every day in a different way. We might train on, say, for example, it's communication skills. I learned effective communication. You need intention, you need attention. Volume matters, the space, the distance, the velocity of your speech. All these things matter, right? I want to teach other people how to be effective communicators. So for 1 week, we're going to talk about effective communication. And on Monday, I'm going to have a video from YouTube on communication. Tuesday, we're going to do some role playing on communication. Wednesday, we might read some excerpts from a book on communication. Thursday, we're going to have a speaker come in and talk about communication, right? We're going to do it. We're going to teach it a little bit different each day. That way, somebody who learns visually can get it. Somebody who learns audibly can get it. Somebody who learns by writing stuff down can get it. But we're just talking about effective communication for a week. And if you have 52 of those themes throughout the year, now we as leaders are positioning them to be successful, to gain wisdom, to gain knowledge in a faster way than we ever did, to receive it. And then we can use the feedback and the communication and so on and so forth to adjust, right? Maybe week 7, you've heard from your people that like, whoa, we really need some help in this area. Okay, great. So we'll change that. So it's a combination of having a plan. Don't just wing it and expect everybody to give you what you need. Have a plan and then have some flexibility.
I really like the part you talk about the different modularity, because not everybody learns the same way. Some people love live instructor-led training. Some people learn by writing things down, other by reading books or watching videos. So